Alright, welcome back. Back to Irie running away from the mountain dogs, which I can't imagine this ending well for him, right? As we've seen, he's terribly inexperienced. There's probably multiple units along the road leading away from here. Yeah, I just can't imagine this ending well for Irie. He's gonna die. Anyway, the mountain dogs had Irie's car in their view as it ran away at full speed. They have to find a perfect spot and timing to stop him. It's not easy to drive a car when you're in a rush. Of course, the more you step on a gas pedal, the more speed you gain. But when you're in a hurry, you can't control the steering wheel well enough to escape quickly. Irie could see his pursuers in his rearview mirror and was completely distracted by that. He was driving carelessly. His driving was so reckless that he could easily get into an accident on his own. As the fear was driving him into confusion, he made a wrong turn. And that mistake made him even more confused and panicked. Although the two guys were ordered to stop him, they were starting to think Irie is going to get into an accident without them doing anything. They'd rather not drag this into a car chase if they didn't have to.
追跡中の保安車両へ。こちら大鳥湾。聞こえ。隊長だ。こちら保安車両。現在追跡中。現在地は5丁目付近林道。詳細な位置は不明。本部要請につきバックアップに向かってる。到達予定は15分後。こっちは当てにするな。俺だって間に合うわけねえと思ってんだ。
Okonagi grumbled. He had to leave Okinami in a hurry to respond to Major Princess. But because of the distance, there was no way he could get there in time. Even so, he was still ordered to provide backup. He could have explained, but the princess wouldn't have listened to him anyway. The mountain dogs who were with Okonagi smiled bitterly.
追跡の方角は最悪の場合、町の方へ抜けます。そいつは許すな。山狩りはしてやる。足を破壊しろ。そこに人目は？武装は？両脇は深い森林です。人目はなし。武装は保安車両常備の短期間銃が1。
The guy in the passenger seat reclined it and climbed into the back. He lifted one of the seats and took out a black machine gun. The paint on one corner was coming off and the shiny silver metal was exposed. It was a machine gun, but it didn't look as powerful as an ordinary one. However, once the dog extended a shoulder stock and set it in place, the weapon looked far more vicious.
保安常備は MP5 A5 か SD3 か。
The man in the back seat looked at the uniquely shaped gun barrel. It was thick and long.
SD3 です。サイレンサー付き。発砲を許可する。フルバーストでタイヤを破壊しろ。保安車両了解。攻撃する。
The guy in the back seat opened up the driver's side back window and leaned out of the car. His sharp eyes aimed at one of the tires on Irie's vehicle. It was a straight road. Irie's car was weaving, but not enough to avoid a shot. The pursuers had his car in their sights. They were trying to get as close to Irie's car as possible, but they were afraid they might get caught up if it overturned. They soon decided that this was as close as they were going to get.
3カウントで発砲する。3、2、1。
Fire! The sound the machine gun made was a lot quieter than what people would imagine, but its power was unimaginable. One of the tires in Irie's car was cut to shreds and collapsed in a puff of white smoke. Because one tire collapsed all of a sudden, Irie lost control of his car. He tried to steer away, but that made things even worse. As it spun, Irie's car drove off the shoulder of the road and slid down the slope into the forest. The sound of trees breaking and the car being battered from every direction disappeared down the slope. The pursuers stopped their car and looked down after it, but the plants were growing so high, it was impossible to check from there.
攻撃成功。標的車両は斜面を転落。死亡の可能性もあり。これより徒歩で追跡。制圧。大鳥湾了解。ウグイスが周囲を探し回ってるぞ。運が良ければ合流するだろう。こっちは相変わらず間に合わん。お前らが頼りだ。 頼むぞ。了解。更新を終わる。行くぞ。
The mountain dogs left their car and headed into the woods without hesitation. Well, Irie is dead, so we're just gonna, yeah. Akasaka had received the phone signal from Irie. The phone rang for over 3 minutes. The signal told Akasaka that Irie was in some kind of an emergency, and that Akasaka himself was in danger now. Takano made a mistake. She didn't realize that the ringtone itself was the signal. She assumed someone staying at the house would pick up the phone eventually. Her error allowed Akasaka to perceive that extremely important forewarning. Akasaka waited for exactly 3 minutes, then ran downstairs quickly. He had already put his shoes on while listening to the phone ringing. Akasaka had memorized the layout of the town from the map he'd kept near the phone. He knew the shortest route to the Sonozaki's residence, as well as a number of alternate routes in case the shortest one was already blocked. People would be surprised to see a stranger coming out of the house, but Akasaka didn't care about that at the moment. He had to get to the Sonozaki residence immediately. However, the observers would see him, and that was a problem. They'd soon come after him. Upon finding the house empty, they'd assume the man who ran from it knew something. Once Akasaka left Rika's house, he had to be prepared to fight. He relaxed his shoulders and reached for the doorknob.
Sansa, R宅の監視班からです。
That's not R there. That's a man.
R宅から不審な男が飛び出しました。
男？何者？どうでもいいわ。追って捕らえて。
監視班了解。制圧する。
It was only 10 a.m. It was a lively morning. Many people were getting ready for the festival. Akasaka weaved through the people going in the opposite direction and ran down the stairs leading from the shrine. The mountain dogs were already chasing after him. There was a significant gulf between the happy faces on the villagers and the serious faces on Akasaka and his pursuers. He could hear them coming up behind him. He didn't even need to turn around to check. Akasaka held his breath, focusing all of his senses to their limits as he sprinted even faster than he usually could with all his might. Success rate of an escape depends on the distance between the pursuer and the pursued. Even a little distance makes a difference. Akasaka ran down to the bottom of the stairs like the wind, then headed in the opposite direction, away from the Sonozaki residence. Of course, this wasn't a mistake of his. He just wanted to lose them.
やろう。なんで奴は伊達天かよ。
Thought you guys were supposed to be elite or something. The observers weren't ready for this chase. They never expected a fast and fully grown man to run out of the house. They assumed it would be a little girl. That assumption was their mistake. Besides, Akasaka's locomotive-like power was nothing like that of normal people. There was no way they could catch him. The mountain dogs fell for Akasaka's trick. They called HQ, told him that he was headed in the opposite direction, and followed him that way. Akasaka was confident that he could have had them completely confused if he had a little more time. Not only that, he could have attacked them individually. Were there 3 pursuers? No, there were probably 4 of them. His mind, body, and skills were all in top condition, so it should be possible for him. Usually overrating oneself is dangerous, but Akasaka was above such an immature level. Resisting violently at a place other than his destination might prompt them to waste manpower and time. But Akasaka wasn't sure of the real meaning of Irie's phone signal. They were at a severe level of emergency. Akasaka had no time to waste, so he had to get to the Sonozaki residence. As Akasaka ran as fast as he could, he tried to think about the situation calmly. Could he attack them first, and then head to the Sonozaki residence? The pursuers were scattered about and running out of breath. It would not be easy to fight 4 men at the same time, but it would be different to take them on one-on-one. When Akasaka decided he had a high enough chance of winning, he took a deep breath and made a U-turn around a streetlight. The mountain dogs were surprised to see that the man who was running away from them was now running towards them. They prepared themselves to fight. But before Akasaka even reached them, he already had everything all planned out in his head. He had calculated how many blows would be required to take them all out. But his calculations were wrong. Without even needing a second blow, the first pursuer dropped after one of Akasaka's legendary armor-piercing punches connected with his face. And while the first was still in the air, his second armor-piercing punch took out the second pursuer. They really like that zoom effect this time, don't they? They've used it 3 times today. There was a chorus of cicadas, which woke Irie up. He needed a little time to realize what had just happened. His seatbelt had saved him from serious injury. However, it was sheer luck that the metal parts of the seatbelt didn't get tangled, and that the door didn't become warped. He was on the bottom of the slope near a different forest road. Irie endured the pain and removed his seatbelt. He got out of his car soon after. He heard someone walking towards him through the bushes. A pursuer. He couldn't get caught just yet. If he was captured, it would be impossible to rescue Tomitake. Not only that, nobody would ever know that Tomitake was captured in the basement of the clinic. Even though Irie knew he was helpless, he couldn't falter here. The only thing he could do was resist them, and run for as long as he could. But as soon as he started to run, Irie realized it. He had no strength. His legs were shaking and he couldn't even see straight. He had only been stepping on the gas pedal, but his lungs were about to explode and his brain was lacking in oxygen. It had to be that certain type of exhaustion that came immediately after hyperarousal. Hyperarousal? Irie understood that intellectually, but he still couldn't get his body moving. He tried to run, albeit in a wobbly way. He heard a noise coming down the slope behind him. This was it. But Irie still tried to run as far as he could.
保安より本部発見した負傷している模様制圧する
Irie heard the voice of his pursuer. Dang it, he thought, what can I do? I have to run, I have to. Welcome back to baby music.
シオンさん、さっきから歌ってるその歌は何ですか?
Don't you know? It's really popular nowadays.
すみません。音楽には疎いもんで。
There was a wrecked car ahead. White smoke was still visible, so the accident must have just happened. Kasai slowed down.
どうしたの? やっちゃったですね。ってあれ監督じゃない?
Their car stopped. What fortunate timing. The sound of the brake startled Irie, and he fell in his behind. Irie was obviously the one who had been in the accident. Hey, we need a doctor. Oh, wait, there he is.
まさかあれ監督の車ですか?
シオンさん。
大丈夫ですか、入江先生。すぐ医者へ行かれた方がいい。
I am a doctor.
監督を診療所に連れてって監督が自分で診察するわけですね。
さあ、立てますか。診療所までお連れしましょう。
診療所は困ります。園崎家に行かな。
監督ちょっとどういうことよ。まずいんじゃない?
Kasai looked at Irie's car, then looked around the area. Then he whispered to Shion.
シオンさん、訳ありのようです。
どうしたの?
入江先生の車に弾痕が。しかも拳銃とは思えません。
マジ? そっち持って。ひとまず本家に連れて行こう。
The two of them loaded Irie into the back seat, got in the car, and left in a hurry.
監督に話を聞かないと状況がわかんないですね。診療所は困る。どういうことだろ
診療所の何者かに追われたと見るのが今は妥当でしょうが、話を聞くまで分かりません。ただ相当のヤバいことに巻き込まれたのは間違いないようです。
あれ、どこ行くの？
Shion was confused as to why Kasai suddenly made a wrong turn.
敵は先生のタイヤを狙ってました。生かして捕らえるつもりです。私たちのすぐ近くに追っ手が迫っていたかもしれません。
ってことは追ってきてる？後方に遮影なし、上空に機影なし。この地形じゃ密着尾行以外は不可能でしょ。
念のためです。もう一度だけ左折したら本家へ直行します。申し訳ありませんが、シオンさんは後方監視をお願いします。
了解です。
保安より本部、標的は民間車両に拾われた模様。車両ナンバーと車種を送る。
本部了解。捜索中のウグイスは民間車両に標的を変更。至急捜索せよ。入江所長は極力生きたままで確保。接触民間人も制圧せよ。ただし生死は問わない。
大丈夫なの？すぐに見つかるの？
I'd like to see them neutralize Kasai. I feel like that's not going to go very well for them.
ご安心を。所長の白衣には発信機が、ウグイスの応援車両には測定器が積まれていますので、三角測定法で位置を検知できます。
Well, that's not good. Irie was lying in the back seat wearing his white coat. There was a device on his collar. The security department put it there just in case. So no matter how hard Shion tried to look for anyone following them, the enemy already knew exactly where they were.
ウグイス3、標的車両を発見。水車小屋の前を小道に入った。
There's a map of Hinamizawa on the table in the security room. The path by the watermill led to a certain private property. It belonged to the Sonozaki family, and the Sonozaki residence was the only building on it.
三叉。
あらあら、袋のネズミね。
こちら大鳥1、ウグイス、まだ突入するな。もうじき大鳥が合流する。合流してから一度に突入するぞ。
ウグイス1了解。
クラギ、ウグイスにさっさと突入させないと相手に無駄な時間を与えるわよ。
感度あるし。
I can't hear you. Speak up.
誰も私の言うことなんか聞かないんだから。
This is Takano's opportunity to be upset. I hate bad connections. This is a long one today, isn't it? The Sonozaki family basement had a security system which displayed images captured from the various security cameras on the property. Of course, it wasn't as high-tech as the one at the Irie Institute. It was in the room on the second floor of the Gasso house, a Japanese-style room where you had to kneel to avoid hitting your head. With bundles of wires snaking away from the monitors, it felt like a hidden chamber. There was electricity and a phone nearby, and although it was in a basement, it had all the basic amenities of the Sonozaki residence. At first, all the club members had watched the monitor curiously, but after a while, it got too hot in such a tiny room. Mion and Rina stayed in the room to observe the monitor.
みーちゃん、なんだろう。車が入ってきたよ。
これは笠井さんの車だね。多分シオンでしょ。今日の祭りに合わせて遊びに来たってことだろうね。たくなんでこんな日に。空気の読めないやつ。
Their granny had been at the shrine since the early morning, so there was nobody upstairs to answer the door. And if Mion didn't answer it, Shion would think that nobody was home. Mion wondered if she should tell Shion what was going on. Shion could be helpful sometimes. Kasai's car stopped in front of the gate. Someone was getting out of it.
あれ？みーちゃん、あれ監督だよ。
They saw Shion and Kasai holding Irie on the monitor. Obviously something serious had happened.
行ってみよう。レナにケイちゃん、一緒に来て。サトコたちはここでモニターの監視。リカちゃんは表に出ちゃダメだよ。羽生はそれでも出てかないようリカちゃんの監視。
お任せですわ。なのです。ひどいのです。
Maybe Okonagi had made the right decision. If he had let Nightingale go in as Takano had ordered, it would have been on the monitor. But Okonagi ordered them to stand by until another unit arrived, so they waited. So Mion didn't notice that the enemy was about to attack. By this time, there were many vehicles belonging to the Mountain Dogs parked by the windmill. Okonagi and Phoenix One had joined with Nightingale, and they were getting ready to head in. However, it had been a good idea to leave Satoko to watch the monitor. And if Mion hadn't gone out, Irie would have been killed. Mion didn't know it yet, but Irie was their only hope of rescuing Tomitake. So as a result, entirely by circumstance, they did everything correctly.
おねえ、もう神社の方かな。シオン、お姉たちどっから来てんですか。さては地下にいましたね。あそこで遊んでるって鬼ババに言いつけますよ。んなことはどうでもいい。監督は監督。
まさかやられたのか。
ってことはお姉たちも訳ありのようですね。何が起こってるんです？
しーちゃん、話すからよく聞いて。実はね。
監督、何があったんですか？すみません。富武さんが山犬に捕まりました。診療所の地下区画に囚われているようです。私は逃げる時に奴らに追われて事故を起こしてしまい。
Irie explained everything he could while enduring the pain. Everyone was happy to see him safe, but Mion's expression quickly grew stern. Then she asked Shion a question.
追われてる。尾行はなかったよ。
とにかく中へ。良くない雲行きです。
They heard the sound of a car approaching. And it wasn't alone. Who could it be at this time of day? It was a waste of precious seconds to even think that.
つけられてんじゃん、シオンのバカ。つけられてないもん、お姉のバカ。
Kasai picked up both sisters and ran through the gate.
地下へ急ぎましょう。あそこなら安全です。
Safer, anyway.
変な車がいっぱい来ます
わよ。わかってる。地下に戻って。扉を閉めるよ。リカちゃんは？
羽生さんと一緒に隠し部屋に入りましたわ。
ウグイス6標的を発見。R の友人数人も一緒です。
Eliminate them all.
間違いないわ。そうよね、ジローさん。
Tomitake was lying on the floor of the security room. His hands and legs were cuffed, and there was another pair of handcuffs to connect them, leaving him bent backwards on the floor. He couldn't get up or even turn around. Takano laughed and poked Tomitake's side with the toe of her shoe. The mountain dogs climbed over the fence easily. There was no need for anyone to explain at this point. It was obvious that they were the enemy and that they were the mountain dogs that Rika had spoken about many times. They went through the grove of trees and headed for the entrance of the underground storehouse. The first 5 mountain dogs were supposed to capture them all, but they fell down one after another. Just as one of the mountain dogs started to wonder why they fell, he felt something on his leg. The next moment, he was flying through the air. As he stood up, his leg got pulled again. He realized then that there was a rope wrapped around his leg. Because of the way he fell, the rope was wrapped tightly around it and wouldn't come off easily. Satoko had set up lots of traps in the bushes. After all, she wouldn't just sit around all day on an empty property. The club members headed into the underground storehouse one after another. The mountain dogs couldn't do anything, although they did see them. It was a heavy door, but when they put their strength together, it closed easily. He unlocked the door quickly, putting on the deadbolt for good measure.
これ大丈夫かな？破られないかな？テレビには5台、6台、いえ、もっと映ってたかもしれませんわ。全部ワゴン車で、中には変な男たちがいっぱい。
簡単には破られないでしょうが、荒ごとに慣れている連中です。
I was gonna say, in a previous story, I believe the police broke through this door, right? So I imagine these guys will be able to as well.
過信しない方がいいでしょ
う。Before he could even finish speaking, someone pounded on the door. The second group of mountain dogs had arrived. Although the heavy door was separating them, it wasn't at all comforting to know that the enemy was just on the other side.
私の失態ですみません。
監督は何も失敗してないですよ。とにかく、奥へ行こ
う。そうだな。監視カメラの様子で敵の人数を探ろうぜ。
はいはい。私はのけ者で事情もわからずいきなりクライマックスですよ。はい。もう。あんたには5分時間ができたら全部説明するから。
ウグイス1より大鳥1。標的は防空壕のようなところへ逃げ込んだ。扉は鋼鉄製、突破できない。
大鳥1了解。この園崎家ってやつはとんでもない金持ちだな。敷地が広すぎて包囲は不可能だ。包囲は断念。俺たちも突入に加わるぞ。ウグイスはその辺の倒木を探せ。大筒にして扉をぶち破る。
大鳥7より大鳥1。インドア用のプラ爆があります。準備しますか？
Plastic explosives are explosive for military use. There are various different kinds, but he was talking about the type specially made to break down doors. Okonagi momentarily thought it was a good idea, but changed his mind right away. This was a small village. If there was an explosion, everyone would hear. It was daytime and they were on the surface. It was the worst time and place for the mountain dogs to do their job.
さすがに爆破は無理だな。ああ？いや待て。今何時だ？
もうじき10時です。
使えるぞ。大鳥7、やるぞ。新刊を準備しろ。
は？隊長、どうして10時だと爆破が可能なんですか？
It was like, is it festival time or something like that? Okonagi's mind was working sharper than ever. He was sure that this would work.